And good afternoon. How is everybody doing out there today? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's kill the music here. We don't need to hear any more of that. Thank you very much, Mr. Winamp. So how's everybody doing out there on a beautiful Sunday? So yeah, today I've been working on a little bit of a um, I guess a PowerPoint for you guys. I'm actually just currently putting some of my demo cards into sleeves because they are impossible to shuffle otherwise. I had some brand new sleeves delivered via Amazon here today. And yeah, so today my thought was to talk about the collectible card game that I've been working on that is themed to Ashes of Creation because I am in no way have I been given any kind of official permission to do anything. I have let Margaret know that I'd be happy to talk with them about it if they don't have something in mind. I know they have a board game that they're working on because we seen that in the last 24-hour in their 24-hour live stream from last year. So apparently they do have a board game that is in development. In fact, by now I think the board game's probably been created, and they're just waiting to release it. They'll probably release it along with the game as well. So today is just show you a little bit about what I have so far, and I got more than what I'm going to tell you guys. I just don't want to give away the farm yet. And this is just kind of an introduction. I want to gauge interest. I want to see if this is something that people think would be fun. And have you guys maybe challenge me a little bit on anything that I have in here because I might be a brilliant collectible card game designer, but there are always flaws, right? There's always things, and eventually there will be some actual play test. I will actually do like a video play test of me with probably a couple of decks. Probably going to teach the girlfriend how to play. She doesn't even know how to play Magic, and yeah, we're going to go with that. So I do have a little bit of a presentation. There's a draw open as well. Feel free to enter into the draw. I just want to see if we'll get a few more people in here first before I get going, because there's nothing worse than you're halfway through a presentation and somebody comes in and asks you a question about something that you mentioned at the very beginning of said presentation. So we'll just see if we can't get a few more people in here first, and then we'll kind of go. So a couple of the caveats that I do want to post, because this is an unofficial Ashes of Creation project. I'm not licensed for anything AoC related. So in my demo, I do have, well, in the demo, there really isn't anything that actually mentions Ashes of Creation other than the very first slide. You could probably play this style of game with many other collectible card games that are out there, not just like an Ashes of Creation. It's not, I guess, something, you could technically play Magic almost the same way. Maybe not exactly, but you could probably get very, very close to playing Magic the Gathering with kind of the style that I have. You'd have to change a couple of rules. First off, there is no mana. There isn't magic per se. Simply because it adds a lot of variables when you start adding magic. No, we lost two people already. See, this is why I wait, because I'm not going to get straight into things until there's a few people here. Now, I think I have managed to include several very good systems that are in Ashes of Creation into this game, and we will talk a little bit about that as well. And yeah, hopefully, we'll get some interest. I'll get some ideas from you guys, and from there we can just kind of, maybe, yeah, kind of look forward to where I can go or where I will go with this. because this is something I would like to develop. So I might have to come up with a different name, because obviously if there's, if they don't want to license it, then that's fine. I'll just have to come up with a different name and kind of sell it that way, because this is something that I should be able to make a little something off, a little coin, whether it be locally or otherwise. The great thing is actually getting cards done isn't that hard. I can easily go to Fiverr and get the art done, but I think it'd be a lot more fun to just kind of license it to Intrepid Studios, and all they have to do is just run with it, because all the hard work will be done, right? Printing cards is nothing. It's developing the game and the rules. And the thing is this is one of the tricky bits, is because the game's not actually out yet, and we're not even into an alpha. I kind of have to run with kind of what have I seen already as far as creatures and stuff like that. We don't even know player abilities yet, really. So, because the idea ultimately is to try and showcase as many aspects of the game within the CCG as possible. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And hopefully this will get their attention. And they, at least, or Stephen's attention or Margaret's attention, and they'll be like, hey, you know what, this actually has some merit. I think it's worth having a conversation, and kind of go from there. Or, they might just send me a cease and desist, right? And just say, hey, you know what, we already got something in the works, and we don't want you muddying our pools. And they can absolutely do that as well. I like to make little CCGs as a hobby. I have another one I've been working on for years, trying to it's more the storytelling aspect of it, because I think you should be able to tell a really good story through your game. And of course, I'm trying to create something from scratch, right? Where with Ashes of Creation, they've already got all of that storyline down, so they could add in flavor text or whatever they want, right? So this is Ashes of Creation inspired collectible card game, because this is not licensed or I have no permission. I have absolutely got no feedback whatsoever. I actually even asked Margaret, if they had a CCG in the works, and if not, if they'd be interested in hearing what I have. I got nothing, which is to be expected, because they don't want to commit either way, because that could be seen as obviously committing to something. So they didn't want to commit to anything. So this is basically, I'm calling this the pre-corruption set 1. So this is the core set. Now, I'm not going to introduce too many cards. I don't have any cards in the slideshow. I do have the cards here, and we'll probably go through a couple of those or whatever. I do have basically 2 working decks, and eventually I will, like I said, I'll try and set up my play table here, point the camera down, and actually do a game live. It probably won't be today, because my desk has got a bunch of crap on it. But I do have 2 relatively functioning decks. I have played them against each other a couple of times, and I've definitely have discovered a balancing issue that I have to fix. Now, I've partially fixed it by just introducing some new cards to the decks, right? So all I'm using for the cards is just print it yourself business cards. So that's what I've been kind of using for that. And again, everything is subject to change as balancing goes. But this is basically the basic rules and gameplay introduction. So ready for gameplay. To play Rise of the Phoenix, which is what I'm calling it right now. I might call it something else. Because I'm thinking Rise of the Phoenix would be good for I guess you could call it Rise of the Phoenix and stand with that, because this is the Phoenix Rose first time when the corruption obviously came, right? we were enjoying our lives in Vera. The corruption came, and the Phoenix, the goddess of creation, had to create the portals to send us to Sanctus. So the first set is going to be based around, I think the idea of um, the introduction of corruption and corrupted creatures. So I think what we'll see in game when it comes to corrupted creatures, you won't necessarily have in the card game's initial set. There will be a set that will eventually be corruption based, because I'm still trying to define the rules around how corruption will work, because I want it to have some very special rules. Now, in this game, you will get to select from one of 4 metropolises. So that will be the religious, the military, economic, and scientific. Now, each metropolis basically is your primary character. So each metropolis will have a different set of rules or abilities. So your metropolis will be the card that you play face up, everybody gets to see it. And so, for example, the military metropolis, military affiliated upkeep costs reduced by 1, and we'll get to that. Caravans gain +1/+2 protection. Defeating opponent military affiliated units awards 2 resources, or deal 1 damage each turn to an opponent's front line. And again, we'll kind of get to what some of these things mean. But basically, I've given each one 4 different things. Now, the idea is once we get into the game and we get to see what each metropolis offers, then I would redefine these cards to be more representative of what they actually are. So this is kind of based loosely on what do we know so far. So you'll need at least 1 d20. There are going to be some dice rolls, right? Because Ashes of Creation is based on Dungeons and Dragons. Clearly, looking at the Pathfinder and stuff, because that's where it came up. So there will be some dice rolls for some cards. I'm not exactly sure. Like mages, for example, will probably have them. I'm thinking the hero cards are going to have different skills or abilities that you would roll a d20 on, and then that would give you kind of an idea of what action you can use. So it's just a thought process, because I do want to try and incorporate that element or that feeling of the D&D into the CCG. And I played a bunch, and not too many have anything like that. So it is one of those things that I'm hoping is going to help it stand out. Now, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to post them in chat. You will need tokens and counters, either beads, dice, or other such things. This game is going to be, I don't want to say counter heavy, but there are definitely things you're going to be having some counters or whatever for different tokens and stuff like that. You'll need a large enough playing surface. You're definitely going to need something I'd say at least Magic the Gathering size, maybe even a little bit bigger. You'll need an opponent. This is for a minimum of 2 people. However, there are game modes that you can have up to 6 people. And that's where we are going to get into the castles, which will be coming in future expansions, where it's basically like generals for Magic the Gathering. You'll have your general in the middle with a castle, and then you'll have your 2 lieutenants on the side, and they'll have metropolises. And so the castle will have its own unique abilities. Now, you can also use the castles in standalone 1 versus 1. So it's going to be kind of balanced for that as well. And so you can play a castle versus a metropolis, right? Everybody gets the same amount of health and life. So, kind of the glossary of terms. Now, if you've played a collectible card game in the past, most of these things you are already going to know. But your deck is the cards you play with, right? So, your deck of cards.
Rather than calling your deck your library, I'm calling it your tome, because if you're watching the the mage play and stuff like that. They got a tome, they got a book of spells and stuff like that. Now, these aren't really spells so much, as they're just things that you're going to command. They're things that you're going to summon. Like I said, magic isn't really a thing so far. Like there aren't instants or interrupts necessarily, at least not yet, or they're not defined as such. Now, you may have a mage that has an ability that you could use as an instant or an interrupt. But as far as cards you're playing from your hand, that's not too likely to happen. You're going to have cards that, for the most part, you play on your turn only. And the idea is that's to try and get away from that stack system that Magic the Gathering has. That is probably the bane of 99% of all the arguments that you have, right? Now, if you're arguing with somebody in a game of Magic the Gathering, it's probably because of the stack, right? It's how do you run down your instants and interrupts and what does what and how do you back it off. And that's one of the things that actually kind of got me disinterested in Magic the Gathering is they started changing the rules, right? And so it kind of got to the point where, I'm playing an interrupt, and then somebody else plays an interrupt that just basically said, okay, well, if you do that, then my interrupt would have never been cast in the first place, and it kind of ruins that. So your graveyard is basically where your discard pile is. I'm calling it a graveyard because most of the cards you're going to have are going to be units, and so things are going to go to the graveyard. And again, this could change. So you're going to have two battle lines. So you're going to have your front line, which is the line closest to your opponent, closest to their side of the playing area, and the back line, which is the line closest to your seated position. And you're going to have cards that are going to move between those, forward, back as part of your strategy. So whereas a lot of games have a form of summoning sickness, we're just kind of calling things actions. And so, you can only take one action per turn per card. Now, obviously, there are going to be, yes, I did cyber. So there are going to be other cards that will change these rules, right? It's just like, with any other game, these are kind of the standard concepts, but you may very well have a card that allows a unit to attack. And in fact, you can even have an ability, right? So vassals are additional resource generation cards. So some of the things that I'm trying to bring into the card game that is also representative of the systems of AoC is the node system. So again, you play as basically the mayor of a metropolis, but you can have vassals. Now these are cards that are in your deck, and you have to spend resources to make these cards vassals. But now what vassals do is they generate resources for you, and that's where the Caravan System comes in, which is another system that I've managed to bring in, and we'll get to that later on in this. There's only 10 slides. We're on number 3. Augments, additional stats or abilities to the player area or card attached to. So rather than calling them enchantments or enhancements, Steven and the team, they like to use augments a lot, right? You're augmenting this, you're augmenting that. So, for example, and a lot of these cards are going to change names and stuff like that. But, I guess I can find one here. But you'll have like a weapons upgrade or an armor upgrade. And those would be considered your augments, right? So I'll have a weapon upgrade here, right? Weapon upgrade, add +1/+0 to target unit, right? And so that would be an augment. In Magic the Gathering, it'd just be an enchantment. So basically the same thing. Now the difference is, this is upgrade weapon. What I want to do is actually have weapons from the game featured as cards, so that it's not just going to be general weapon. You can actually get a glaive of whatever, something or whatever, and so everything's going to have a purpose and it's going to have some sort of a connection to the game. But for now, for playtesting purposes, it's just upgrade weapon +1/+0, and you can get other weapons that may not add damage, right? This is a +1 damage. You might get a weapon that gives you an ability. So you might get an action, right? So you might get a bow of something, right? So now rather than giving up a +1 to your straight damage, now you have an action that this bow now gives a melee unit +1 or +2 range, and again, we'll get to that later on in here. But this is just kind of some ideas. So action, when a unit, okay, it's tapping. Basically is what an action is. It's tapping, but not exclusively to tapping. So an action is when a unit does something, it's using an action. Each unit can only perform one action each turn. Actions may be an attack or using an ability or moving between battle lines. So what I'm using as well for the actions is just an A with a circle, and then you can also do numbers of circles just to show that there's things that need to be done. That one's upside down, but basically, yeah. So an action is everything can only perform one action per round unless the card says otherwise. Right? There might be a card that allows you to do 2 actions. Right? This unit may perform 2 actions each round, or you could pay more resources for that unit to perform another action. Right? So there's often a cost. Lure, any unit with lure must defend all attackers if possible. It's the same thing in Magic the Gathering, right? So if I have a poison toad, it has lure, and you attack with 3 units, all 3 units can be blocked by my poison toad, and then I get to decide how does the damage get split between all 3 units, but my poison toad might be a corrupted poison toad, at which point, they would all get corruption. So, and again, I don't really know how the corruption system works entirely, so a lot of this is just based on conjecture, but I'm thinking, it's probably good enough that it'll work. So advance. Advance. Units enter directly to the front line and can attack or use other actions. So advance is it's front line or back line, whichever line you want, right? So they enter directly to. I should change it to battle line, and they can attack or use other actions on the same turn that they were summoned, right? That's basically what advance is. Corrupted. Units that are corrupted can spread their corruption to all units that block them or are blocked by them. Units corrupted this way must be discarded if corruption remains at the end of the turn. So, for example, I have a corrupted crow. Now, the corrupted crow, because it's corrupted when it comes into play, you gotta go. Okay, see you later, Pug. Thanks for stopping by. So the corrupted crow stays in play because it was already corrupted when it was summoned. But if say I have I don't know, what do we got here? Say I have mercenaries, right? So I got mercenaries. Now the mercenaries can't block the crow because the crow is flying. But say I attack with the mercenaries and you block with your corrupted crow. Now your corrupted crow is going to go smush. But now my mercenaries are corrupted, and if I do not do something that removes that corruption by the end of that same turn, these guys go to the discard pile too. Or if I attack you and either way, if a corrupted creature is blocking or is blocked by a non-corrupted creature or unit, then that unit gets corruption. And then at the end of the turn, unless you get rid of the corruption, that unit's discarded. So it's almost like a terminal illness, right? And again, not fully understanding how corruption works, I might end up doing like corruption counters, where, say each turn that a unit is corrupted, it gains a counter, and when those counters equal its upkeep cost or its summon cost, then that unit is discarded, right? So that's part of the balancing process. And the idea is that creatures, if they come into play already corrupted, then they just stay in play. Now, the differences as well that I have as one of the balancing features is, and again, these are terrible examples, but the number on the right is the summoning cost. Well, that's how many resources it's going to cost to bring the card into play. The number on the left, that's its upkeep cost, and we'll get to the upkeep stuff here in a second. But every turn you have to pay an upkeep. So corrupted creatures have a really high upkeep, right? So even for you as the summoner, who's brought this creature into play, you, as a tactical thought, may need to decide do you want to pay its resource because it's still worth it to you, or do you want to discard it and let it go, right? So whereas this guy, right, its summon cost is 4, upkeep is 2, the corrupted bird is 3, and its upkeep is 6, and now, of course, the crow does 2 damage with 1 life, and the mercenaries do 3 damage with 2 life. Now they also have, this is economic, right? So it's green, it's economic, because money is green, and so there's the economic gains, right? So for example, economic affiliated upkeep cost reduced by 1. So if I'm playing an economic deck, so my Metropolis is economic, I'm playing an economic card, his upkeep is only 1, not 2, right? So it kind of makes building decks a little bit fixed, but that's where you can have a little extra fun and you can play with other cards, right? But it's just if you play a deck that's more in line with its theme, it's designed for newbies and stuff like that. So you're not forced to play that starter deck. You can still add whatever you want, but it's just kind of helping people get into the game a little easier if they've never played stuff like that. Range. So units with range attack can attack a battle line beyond melee range. So melee range is face to face, right? And when we get to the next example, we'll kind of break it down. Range 1 can skip 1 row. Range 3 can directly impact the opponent's Metropolis. Range units cannot attack or defend from the front line of their opponent. So basically, ranged units can't attack anything directly in front of them. Is basically the idea. And the reason for that is primarily because, think about a catapult, a trebuchet. They're usually either taller or bigger than one person, and so when they are firing over people's heads, right? So they can't just, unless they're broken, attack somebody that's right in front of them, right? It's shooting past everybody's head. And then upkeep. The cost to keep a unit in play. If upkeep is not paid, the unit is discarded from the play area. Upkeep is paid as the first action of a player's turn. So let's kind of get into the play area. What does a play area look like? So you have your decks on either side. There's the dividing line for the table. Now you're going to shuffle your decks, put your decks down, and then you're going to draw 5 cards into your hand. So you can have 5 cards to start, and you can only have a maximum of 8 cards in your hand at the end of your turn. So if you have more than 8, you got to discard down to 8. Chances are you're not likely to have too many cards in your hand, simply by just the nature of how the game is played and the resources and stuff like that. You could probably clear your hand out in your first turn. But that's where there's some strategy involved there, because you start with 100 resources, and the resources are also your life. And if your resources get to 0, then at the start of your next turn, I think you get to, if your life is at 0, when you go to draw your card at the start of your turn, then you lose the game. So again, it's not like Magic the Gathering where as soon as your life hits 0, you're dead, because this is a game where you're using resources, right? And now and your resources don't really get consumed until you get further into the game. Now, Why not at your upkeep? Well, because if you can't pay the upkeep, you just discard everything. But there's a reason why you don't. So anyway, so you have your front line, your back line. So you basically have your offensive line, your defensive line, but you can also attack from your defensive line. It's just that, this is just kind of a nice illustration of how, you would set up your game. Now you can have your metropolises opposite each other. I mean, this is just more or less a mirror image of what you have, right? So concept, taking an MMO to a CCG. Ashes of Creation uses several different systems to bring the game to life. I've attempted to include the spirit of several systems into the core game, and other systems may be included in future expansions or in alternate game styles, one of which is Castle Sieges, which is a 3 versus 3 game mode. So the systems currently included in this version are the Metropolis. So players choose one from the 4 Metropolis node types: economic, military, scientific, or religious. More can be added in future expansions. It just says I'm expecting they will probably add more nodes as the game or more variety to the nodes as the game expands as well. The Metropolis is the core of the player's deck. Everything is powered through the resources and special abilities of the Metropolis. So again, when you start the game, you start with 100 resources, which is also your life. That sounds like a lot, I know. In my testing so far, you're only playing about 20, 25 rounds, which isn't that different from, I think, a lot of the average Magic the Gathering. Depending on what your first hand draw is, I mean, you could spend 25, 30 resources on your very first turn. And then from there, you're just paying upkeeps and stuff like that. So obviously, there is a large expenditure at the very beginning of the game, and that's where there's a lot of strategy, right? You get to see what your opponent putting down first, depending on who goes first. And then, do you want to try and reserve your resources? If they put out all 5 of their cards to have 5 units, what do you have that can stop those 5 units, but still allow you to keep your resources? Maybe you put out a large creature that turn after turn you're just eating his creatures or their summons, right? And then you start attacking them. Vassals and caravans. So players can cast vassals. These are resource generated cards. Generating cards. Players can create caravans to transport resources from the vassal to their metropolis to add to their total. Caravans can be attacked and resources destroyed. The vassals can also be destroyed or their resources affected. So, for example, you can have 1 city vassal per deck. You can have, I think, 3 village, and I think it was 3 village, and I think, or no, 1 city, 2 towns, 3 villages, which gives you a total of 6 per deck. And that's because, you really don't want to go a little too crazy on that. We can find all of them here. So there's a town, village. Now, again, these are things that have to be somewhat balanced. I think they're pretty balanced already, to be honest. So you have your village, and it says each upkeep, add 1 resource counter to this card, and then you expend 1 resource from your metropolis to launch a caravan with defense equal to the number of resource counters. So your village state is 5, right? So it's going to take you 6 turns to break even on a village state. Now a town will give you 2 resources, but it costs 10, and it costs 2 resources from your metropolis. So again, 6 turns just to break even, and then the city gives you 3 per turn. But again, it's still going to take you at least 6 turns to break even. So if you get these early in the game, awesome. They're very, very good to have. I may reduce their casting cost by a little bit, so it doesn't take you 6 turns. I might take it down. So maybe it's just like an easy 5 turns. But the idea is it should cost you some resources to cast your vassal state, and yeah, but now, again, after 6 turns, right, 3 times 6, you have 18 resources from a city-state, right? So you spent 18, but you're going to get 18 back, so you kind of break even. And then it's also going to continue producing resources after that. So it's kind of where you have this trade-off. Now, there's going to be other cards that will be a boon to your resources from city-states, villages, and town-states, right? So you might get a card that's, profitable harvest, double this turn's counters, right? So on all vassals. So if you had a town, a village, and a city, that would give you 6 total that turn. Well, you get 12, right, for that turn. Now, that obviously is a nice thing. So that being said, there are also cards that can negatively affect these. There's blights, which might remove 50% of the counters. You might get like an earthquake or something, or a volcano or something that destroys it altogether. There's a form of apocalypse, right? So these things, again, the idea is to keep them somewhat balanced. They don't give you a huge advantage in the game if you get one early. But now, if you get one and your opponent doesn't draw one, that it can be a huge advantage, especially if the average game, again, the ones I played, is between about 20 to 25 turns. 6 turns, you break even. So you're really, if you can get one out on your first turn, then you're going to make a lot of resources back from your vassal states, providing the caravans can make it. We'll get to that. Siege warfare. So with the use of a front and back line system, players can strategize their attacks and defense against the opposing army. Some units have range, which can target specific distances, but to do so, you may have to move them into a more vulnerable position, and we'll get into that as well in these slides. But the idea is because sieges are going to be a big part of Ashes of Creation. It's how, it's already Metropolis versus Metropolis, so it's technically a cross siege of sorts, but having a front line and back line, again, it creates that battle strategy where you're attacking your opponent from a distance as well as face to face. And that's one of the things they've talked about in a lot of the videos is that you're going to have characters that can put up these big walls and stuff like that and block a lot of the stuff. So that's why I decided to go with a front and back line and not just your standard. Everything goes on a straight line. Everything's equal. This way you have to actually move your forces back and forth depending on how you want to try and defend or attack or assault and stuff like that. And I'm still working on the heroes because, again, we don't know much about them. We know their names, but we don't know a whole lot about skills, abilities, talents, and stuff like that. But there will be 8 heroes. And then through augments, you can take your 8 core hero classes and combine them into variations of the 64 augmented choices. So basically, the idea is you'll have, say in your deck, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in your deck, you have 8 heroes, right? Now, you could play all 8 heroes as individual characters. So each hero is going to have a primary ability and an augment ability. So what that means is, say I'd play a tank, and then I play a cleric. So the tank is obviously going to have an ability where probably it's going to have lure as an ability, say, right? So your tank will have the lure. So if you expend the resource, then your tank activates the lure, and for that turn, when your opponent attacks, all of the attackers have to attack your tank. Now, he might have an augment ability that might just give so say we play a cleric down instead, right? So if I play a cleric down, and the cleric is going to have probably can heal a certain amount of damage. Now, if I want to play the tank as an augment, its augmented ability might say attached hero gets +0, +4, or +5, right? He gets a lot of defense. So now the cleric, who's probably going to be a 1/1, is now going to be a 5/5. Right, because it got that augment from the tank hero. Now the cleric on the tank, it might be convert half the damage taken into life, or negate 50% of the damage. So your tank has the cleric, and basically the cleric is offering a bubble, right? So I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that yet, but the whole concept is to try and use kind of the same system that they're using in Ashes for the heroes in the game. And then what'll probably happen is different heroes. So for example, the heroes will be named, right? So not all tanks will have the same 2 abilities, right? So what I'll look at is what's the talent tree of the tank, and try to have different tanks that have different skills, primary skills, and different augments. And so that you might have Steven the Sandal tank, or you might have Margaret, the elf tank, or something, right? And they'd have different things. Maybe as a tank ability, they have a root or a stun, right? Where it's basically like a fog, right? I use my stun ability, so there's no damage is dealt in combat. In melee combat this turn, ranged attacks can still go forward. So that's where I'm hoping to bring in some of the different elements. And again, the heroes thing is something I'm still working on and trying to balance it. When you don't have much of a game right now, or not knowing about much of the game, correct myself, not knowing much about the game, trying to keep it in line with what we know is tough. And some of these systems will likely change. But the idea is I'm trying to introduce these things into it. I'm also trying to figure out, again, a good corruption system. Right now, the corruption system is you can cast corrupted creatures. They have a high upkeep because they're dangerous. But they also do more damage per casting, right? When they cast, they're not as expensive to cast as say, a non-corrupted creature with the same power toughness. But their upkeep is much, much higher because, well, you don't want that. And the only other option is units adjacent would get corrupted as well. And that's not fair to you. It really hurts the strategy. I tried that. It didn't work very well because sometimes you get stuck in a position where you need that corrupted creature as part of your offense or your defense, and having units next to it get corrupted, and then that corruption spreads. Doesn't really work. Now, that might be something that we do with like a global augment or global enchantment, where maybe you can use corruption to your advantage, and we'll see how that works, because in the game, corruption's not supposed to be used to your advantage. But if somebody wants to play a dark deck, that may be a castle option, right? Where you have a dark castle or something like that, where it benefits you to actually have a corrupted deck. Now, early on, I'm probably not going to have more than a handful of corrupted creatures, probably like maybe 10 in the entire first set of about 200 cards is the plan, maybe 20. I don't want a lot, so there's going to be some corruptions, the introduction of corruption, and then there might be a corrupted deck set of maybe 90 cards where everything is related to corruption. But I want to see more about the game before we get into that. Let's go to the next slide. So gameplay. So players shuffle their deck. Opponents may shuffle your deck if they want. So if they think that you're a fancy shuffler, then they have the opportunity to shuffle your deck as well. Players place down their Metropolis and 100 resources, which can be represented with dice tokens or other physical means in which all players can readily count the resource pool. So basically, at all times, everybody should be able to easily tell how many resources their opponent has, right? How much life do they have? Players choose who goes first. This can be by cutting their deck, and whatever the highest summoning cost is wins, or you flip a coin as an example. It's up to you, right, to decide who goes first and which way. Each player draws up to 5 cards. Well, it's not up to. You draw 5 cards for your opening hand, and then you draw 1 card at the start of your turn. So obviously, whoever goes first doesn't get to draw a card, but they do get to put their units into play first, which means they get to attack first. So that's the benefit there. Players use the resources from their Metropolis to play the cards from their hand. So again, you have 100 resources. This is a Twisted Rabbit. Twisted Rabbit costs 2 resources. So if I want to play the Twisted Rabbit, then I put the rabbit in play, and I subtract 2 resources from the 100. So I'm now at 98. But I have a creature in play. Right. And then say I want to upgrade its armor. That costs me another 2. But now I have a fat Twisted Rabbit. Depending on how the cards are styled, you'd stack your cards like this to show which one has an augment and stuff like that. So yeah, player shuffle your decks. You pick which Metropolis you want before you start the game, which is going to be part of your deck build because it's going to influence your deck in a big way and how you play. Yeah, you start with 5 cards. You can have a maximum of 8. If you have more than 8, you have to draw down to 8 at the end of your turn. If a player's tome has no more cards, so tome, library, same thing. If you cannot draw a card, you may spend 50% of your current resources from your Metropolis to shuffle your graveyard into your tome. Otherwise, they skip the draw phase of their turn. You do not lose the game for not having cards to draw from. The one thing that really annoyed me with Magic the Gathering is if you cannot draw a card, you lose the game. And I have been in a lot of situations where I didn't need to draw a card to win the game. My next attack, I won, right? But because I could not draw a card, I lost the game. So the fix for this is if I cannot draw a card, that's okay. I still have my military in the field. I can still pay their upkeep costs. I can still do things, right? So I can still potentially win. Now, I can spend 50% of my resources remaining to shuffle my graveyard back into my library or tome. Now, if I have 4 resources left, I go to 2. If I have 50 resources, I go to 25. If I have 100 resources, I go to 50. So, again, there's a risk-reward to when do you want to do this if you need to do this. Now, your deck size, it can be between 40 and 64 cards because a lot of the numbers in Ashes of Creation are based on 5, 8s, 40s, and 64s, right? So 64 is your amount of classes, 40 is your raid group, 8 is your 40 is the size of your raid group. 8 is the size of your group that you can have running around the world, and you can have 5 groups of 8 to make your raid. So I'm kind of playing with those numbers to kind of again tie it into the Ashes of Creation to kind of give it that nod, right? It's that handshake. Seems you're going about this well. Either way, you have the potential to produce financially. Yeah, absolutely, right. And so the idea is if if Steven likes the idea, then, we can have a conversation and, we can, license or whatever. Clearly, since I'm the originator, I'm going to want to be a part of the process with it going forward. I really wouldn't care if I made a crap ton of money off of it. I'm doing this to support Ashes of Creation. They mentioned how it's going to be a franchise, and they have one guy working on a board game already who owns a comic shop and whatnot. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll be the nerd that creates the CCG. And why not? I think that's perfectly fair. I don't have to live in California to do this. And, yeah, it's a pretty easy thing to do, and this is going to be something that's going to be pretty community-driven. And if I was to do a Kickstarter, I would definitely have where there'd be a package where people who contribute to the Kickstarter would have the ability to submit their own cards and or name their own cards. I don't know if I'd have people submit cards because you could get some pretty crazy. Now that being said, I could always come up with a crazy set, right? It's like Magic did with its Unhinged, right? Where you just absolutely ridiculous cards. Right, I could do a set like that too. Because part of the Kickstarter would be, not all the cards would maybe make it into the first set. Because obviously, if the first set's 200 cards, and yet 2,000 people contribute to the CCG idea, well, you're going to have 2,000 cards as part of your first set. You're going to want to have those cards separated and stuff like that. So, all units enter play from the back line. They cannot use any actions when they enter play, but they may defend against attacks. Moving a unit from the back line to the front line is an action. If a unit moves, it cannot use another action or attack, but it may defend. And that's, some really important things there. Love your passion for this. Well, I want to support the game, right? And I want to support the community. I really like the idea of how they have these systems working so well together. And part of the fun of making this is trying to figure out how do I make a bunch of different systems work in a collectible card game. And we're going to actually get to a couple of slides that are going to kind of show off stuff that I think you guys are going to think is pretty cool. Like it actually makes sense in how it works and in how it brings it all together. So when a player... so when a player's Metropolis resources reach 0, they have until the draw phase of their next turn to attain more resources or they lose the game. So, because your resources is your health, it's your life. And so if you're attacking me and you deal direct damage to my city, my Metropolis, well, for each point of damage, I lose a resource, right? My resource goes to 0, right? I don't die at the end of the game. You don't automatically win because I have no resources, right? On my next turn, I still have a chance to get resources to survive. Chances are I'm not going to survive for long, but this is really good for close games, and this is all part of the strategy. And this is where the vassals and the caravans come into play. So there's game phases. right? So this is how you can survive having no resources. So upkeep, right? So like I mentioned before, I don't know if you can see these, but all cards have a casting and an upkeep, right? So the casting is on the right, upkeep is on the left. So casting is the cost to bring the card into play. Upkeep is what you pay each turn to keep it in play. Because, well, people need to eat, drink, sleep. People have a life. Well, the same concept here goes for the game, right? Your players and stuff. Put a little closer. I don't know if you guys can quite see that. So this one costs 4 to summon, 2 is its upkeep. Because they're mercenaries and they're greedy, right? They're economic, they're greedy. Now, and we'll kind of get into the front and backline stuff here again for those who are new and don't quite understand what I'm getting at there. So then you have your move. So you upkeep, and then the second part is moving, right? Because after you've paid the upkeep, now you can have your cards move around. So now your mercenaries can go from the back line to the front line, which is closest to your opponent, or perhaps you have a creature or something that you want to move into your back line because you have a card in your hand that maybe will give it a range attack or something, right? So now it's not as easily attackable from your opponent. So you may move them forward or back as you choose. Again, all units who are moved can take no other actions this turn. So if you take it's like a summoning sickness, right? So when you bring a creature into play, it can't do anything. It just got to the battle zone, and now it just waits on its next turn. Then you move it up into the front line because it had to move positions. So now it can defend from the front line, but it can't attack yet. And then on the turn after that, then it can start attacking. Then you draw one card from the top of your tome into your hand. Then you can play cards from your hand or wait, right? So say I got a really good card, like a fog or something like that, right? So I won't use it yet because obviously there's nothing to fog. Now I can use actions after that. So you use unit actions or other actions from your Metropolis or augments in play. Or wait, so again, for example, in the Metropolis, one of its abilities, one of its actions is deal 1 damage each turn to an opponent's front line. So basically, you're lobbing from behind your city walls, something at your opponent, right? And you can say, I deal 1 damage to that thing, right? And then that damage carries until the end of the turn, and then everything heals up, right? So I could do that. Or I have a creature ability to augment something else, right? So that's where I can use my actions. Or I can wait. Then you declare your attack. So choose my attacking units. My opponent may then declare which of their units is defending, which attackers, if any. And then, again, you go back to, do I want to use any other actions? Because, your actions become like your instance or your interrupt. So you can use actions, but your opponent can use actions again if they have relevant ones from their cards. And then you can play cards. So say... say you're attacking me, well, I can play a fog. Or say I'm attacking you, but you play a fog, and then I play something else that clears the fog, or untaps all my attackers, right? Because if your attackers are attacking, then they become tapped or exhausted, right? They've used their action. So on your next turn, you can still use them to block, but you can't use any special abilities or actions or anything. And I've actually toyed with the idea of if you choose to attack with a unit, that unit cannot defend on its next turn. Right, I think that's how Magic has it. I might go that route as well, just because I think that probably will help the game move a little faster. And then play more cards, and then discard. If you have more than 8 cards in your hand, discard to 8. Any units that have received more damage than they can defend are placed in their controlling player's graveyard. Have I prototyped a game yet? Yeah, I got 2 playable decks that I'm using for playtesting the systems, which so far it works. And now it's just working on balancing. All right, just trying to make sure you don't expend too many resources too fast. Again, so far, I've played a handful of games, and they're between 20 and 25 turns from start to finish, which is about as long as a good Magic game, right? Now, if I was using my burn deck, 8 turns, you're done, right? Or if I was using my Timmy deck and I get the right cards out, 12 turns, you're done. But if somebody's using, some of those more annoying decks with, Time Walk and stuff like that, where, they can just keep taking a turn over and over and over again, you got a game that lasts 30, 40 rounds, right? So right now they're averaging about 20 to 25 rounds, which is 25 turns, which isn't too bad. If you have a 40-card deck, you start with 5 cards and you go another 25 rounds, then you've gone through roughly 30 cards. So you have 10 cards left in your deck. So you've gone through the majority of your deck, and it seems like 100 resources is a lot. But like I said, you could play all 5 cards from your hand on your first turn, and you could be down 25, 30 resources, right? So you're already down to 70 health, basically, right? And then what do I do? Because now it's my turn, I get to draw a card, and I can do the same thing. I can blow it all, right? And be down as well. Or you can try and be more strategic. So there's a lot of... I'm trying to allow as much strategy as possible, and try to, kind of reflect Ashes of Creation, because Ashes kind of has that. So let's get into vassals and caravans. So you have your front line, back line. You have your vassal state. Now your vassal state has enough resources. You make a caravan. Your caravan moves to your front line. Then it has to move to your back line, and then it moves to your Metropolis. So, when the Caravan token spawns on the Vassal card, its power is 0, and its toughness is equal to the amount of resources it carries. When the Caravan is damaged, it loses an equal number of resources to the damage received. If its resources reach 0, the Caravan is destroyed and the token is removed from play. Each turn, the Caravan can move 1 place, from the Vassal to your front line, from front line to back line to your metro. All resources remaining on the caravan are then added to your metropolis's total resources. Other cards may affect the overall power and toughness of your caravan. So, for example, one of these. So the religious metropolis. If you play your game with the religious metropolis, one of the things I have on here is caravans gain +0/+1 protection because they're protected by God. So if your caravan has 7 resources on it, right? Your vassal gets up to 7. You spend the points to create the caravan. Then on your turn, that caravan is on your vassal. So then your opponent can attack your caravan on their next turn. And then on your turn, it moves from vassal to front line. Then your opponent can try and attack the caravan again. And then on your turn, front line to back line, then back line to metro, right? So it's 1, 2, 3 turns, basically, where your caravan is vulnerable. And that's trying to reflect the caravan sieges that can go on. Now, there are going to be other cards that you're going to be able to use to soup up your caravan. Military Metropolis gives the caravans +1/+2. So if you're playing with a military Metropolis, your caravan gets 1 attack. So now when people attack your caravan, or try to attack your caravan, because you can still defend, right? You do get to choose your defenders. Now, you can only choose your defense from the front and back line. So while that caravan is on the vassal, you need to have something to protect that caravan for 1 turn. Or hope that it has enough life that it can survive an attack from your opponent until it gets to your front line or your back line. Right, because if it's on your front line, it becomes a blocker like anything else, right? But you get to choose what you're blocking. The only thing you can't block is direct targeted attacks by actions, right? So if you have a mage, and the mage has some abilities on it where you have to roll a d20, I'll probably make it like 4 abilities probably. So you roll a d4, and or if you get 1 to 5, 5 to 10. 10 to 15, 15 to 20 on a d20. That's what the mage casts as a spell, right? So there's a little bit of mystery involved there. So that you can target a specific unit. But if I'm just saying my mercenary is attacking you, and you have your caravan, and you have 1 other unit on your front line, well, you can say my other unit blocks the mercenaries, and then your caravan's safe. Then your caravan gets into the back line, where it can still be attacked by ranged attacks at that point, because ranged attacks you can target. So it becomes vulnerable to catapults, trebuchets. It can become archers, bowmen, longbowmen, stuff like that. So, how does that work? Then we get into the range stuff. So, ranged units cannot attack the battle line directly in front of them, but they can defend. There we go. So, you have your metropolises. This is a little slower. So, you have your front lines, back lines. So, again, your front lines face each other. Back lines, this is your opponent's units. These are your units. So, in this example, you have range 1s in your front back line, range 2s, front back line, range. So, your range 1 can only attack from the back to the front line of your opponent. Range 2s can attack the back line of your opponent. Range 3 can attack the metro of your opponent. Now, if you have your range in the front line, then your range 1 front line can attack the back line. Your range 2 could now directly attack the metro, or the range 3 can attack directly the metro. But the range 1 cannot attack the front line, right? The range 2 cannot attack the front line. Range 3 cannot attack the front line. Range 3, or range 1, 2, and 3 from the back line can attack the back line of your opponent. Range 3 is the only one at the back that can attack the metro directly, which makes it quite powerful. Well, thank you very much, Simpleton, for the follow. Where your range 2 from the back line can attack either the front line or the back line, right? Your +2 range can hit both, right? And then your +1 range can only attack the front line. So you have to skip 1 entire line. So that's why if the range is in the front line here, it can only attack the back line, which also makes it vulnerable on the front line because in order to attack there, it has to move up. So now you've used 1 turn because it comes into play in the back line. Next turn it gets to attack. But if you move it up, then you've lost 1 turn of attack. And now it's on the front line, so now it's part of your first line of defense. So if you have and it also becomes targetable by your opponent's back line. So if they have a range 1 back here, it's going to pick off this guy because he's only going to have 1 life, probably. They're usually pretty weak, right? They do decent they do decent damage, but they're weak because they're targetable. So that makes them powerful, right? So your range is going to be a 1/1 creature, like a 1/1 bowman. So he'll do 1 damage when it fires over the top, right? So ting ting ting, but it's hitting the front line, and the front line's where you're going to be putting your units with like 2 health or more because you're not going to want him to get picked off. Now the range 2 becomes a little more dangerous because it can attack both the front and the back line, so they're going to be a little more uncommon to get in your sets. But yeah, they can attack either. And then your range 3, which is your trebuchet, it can attack all 3 lines of your opponent, right? So you can attack their front line, their back line, or you can just say, hey, I'm just going to attack you directly. right, for that damage. Now, again, they're all going to do fairly low damage. I think, range 1 will do 1 damage, range 2s, I think, will do 1 to 2 damage, range 3s will do 1 to 3 damage. They're not ever doing a crap ton of damage. And they can only be upgraded by siege mechanics. So if you have like target unit or a weapons upgrade, right? If you have like a weapons upgrade, target unit gets +1/+0. You cannot attach that to a siege unit because siege units are siege units, right? So your bowmen and longbowmen will be a range 1 and 2. So you can do weapon upgrade on them, but your range 2 will also be catapults and probably ballistas. And so you cannot use a simple weapons upgrade. You'll have to use a siege upgrade on them, and they'll be rare. And then your range 3 will be your trebuchets, and I may have maybe like a rare dragon or something because it has flying and it's just ginormous and it's super rare, and maybe it can do a swath over the city, right? A la Game of Thrones style. Maybe I'll add that. I don't know. That seems really powerful. But I think there should be $1,500 decks in this game too. So that's kind of how range is going to work in this game. And again, that's trying to bring in that system of siege weaponry and siege tactics. Because if you have a range +2, okay, great, it can attack +1/+2. But if you move it into the front line, like the animation here shows, right, it can in the front line, your catapult can attack your opponent's metro. So if they don't have anything in their front line, and they have nothing in their back line that threatens you, then you move your catapult up, and then you start pinging your opponent. And then when they start casting or summoning units along their front row here, then you just move your catapult back. You only lose a turn, so they have summoning sickness, your creature basically gets summoning sickness, and then you start pinging each other again, right? I may also make it so if it's a +3 range, it can't attack a +1, right? Because it's so powerful that the trebuchet cannot attack an opponent's front line from the back line. Because there's no reason really to put a trebuchet in the front line. There's none whatsoever. Like you're never going to need to put a +3 range into your front line, unless maybe your opponent has put a negative augment on it that forces it to block or something like that. And there may be. I'm thinking I may have a card called False Orders, where your opponent basically plays false orders. All backline siege machines must move forward 1 line if possible, right? So now your siege machines, which were safe in your backline from direct melee attack, have now moved forward on your turn. So you can't make them go back, right? Like it's on your turn is when this happens. So that's their action. So when your opponent gets their next turn, your stop is right front center in your front line. So I might have some cards like that. Which again, it's how do you build your deck for strategy? Obviously the siege machines are going to be rare, so there's not too much of a likelihood that you're going to need that kind of card. But at the same time, somebody might make a very siege-happy deck because they have money to spend, right? So, trying to figure it all out. That's kind of what this process is, and I just kind of wanted to kind of put out for you guys so far. If you have any questions, or what do you think so far? I know it has potential. And again, right now I'm kind of working off of the 4 Metropolises, and again, I have to reiterate because we haven't seen a lot of the game yet. It's really hard to really showcase the possibilities, right? Once Alpha 1 comes free of its NDA, then I can start looking at creatures. What are the creatures' abilities? How do they attack? Do they have special abilities? What are the heroes' abilities and special abilities? And how can I incorporate those concepts into this game? Because again, this is trying to take the idea of Ashes of Creation, of the node system, the siege system, the caravan system, the hero system, and convert it into a very easy to use, easy to follow CCG. I would say this is probably easier to play than Magic the Gathering because you're not dealing with instants and interrupts in the same way. There aren't really, there's spells per se, but the idea is as much as possible, rather than just having a weapon, just say weapon upgrade, I want to have it be where, it's a named weapon, right? And that weapon might give special abilities rather than simply a bonus to an attack or a bonus to defense. Maybe it gives lure. Maybe it prevents against corruption. Maybe it does some of these other things. So and another example of like one of the cards. And again, I still have to balance out the casting costs and stuff like that. But I have a money changer. So the money changer has its own abilities. Here, so I'm gonna find another one so you guys can kind of read along. The other rule is you cannot have more than 5 of the same card in your deck, right? So some cards you can have up to 5, and then other cards will be restricted to 1 or 2, right? So and that's not really a whole lot different. So anyway, so Money Changer, it's 5 to summon, 2 upkeep. It's an economic card. So as one of its actions, place 2 resource counters on Money Changer. On upkeep, add 1 counter. And then so you only have to do that once. You don't have to keep doing that every turn, right? So you only do that once, and then every turn you add another counter. And then as an action, remove all counters to your Metropolis. So basically, what this guy's doing is money laundering is what he's doing. So if money changer dies, all counters are lost. So you've got quite a bit of life there. Pretty low upkeep, but he's only a 1/1. So this guy, he's probably going to stay in your back line, and you're probably going to protect him. But that's one way of getting some of your resources to come back. So I might have to give him an extra life. It depends, because ranged, I think anything ranged is probably going to be automatically an uncommon to a rare uncommon, and then you'll have your rares and ultra rares. Just because, this guy's a very powerful card, but it's not fair if your opponent just casts a longbowman and twangs them, on the next turn. Now, again, on your turn, when you see that longbowman come out, that's where you take your money changer on his turn as an action, and you remove all the counters. So you're going to get your 2 counters back, as well as any additional counters, which should be at least 1 more. So you're going to get at least 3 counters from 2, and that's kind of the idea. You can do that. Now, I don't have this listed as having a limit, so conceivably every turn you could add 2 counters on it, and then on the upkeep get that 3rd one. So it's a lot of math you got to hang on to in your head, right? Because if 2 turns you've added 2 counters, well then on the 2nd turn you got 1 extra counter, and then so you technically have 5. And the turn after that you'd have 7, then 9, and then say you added 2 more, then it's up to 11, and then on your next turn you'd have 14. Right, because now you have 3 counters. So you have to remember that stuff and expect an argument. So I don't know if something like this is going to be you can only do it once. Again, as part of the balancing, because I do want there to be ways for you to regain some of your resources without having to have a vassal or the caravan. So it's just like in the game, right? You don't necessarily have to run a caravan in the MMO, but the caravan's going to be a pretty big deal, and you can have multiple vassals, right? So you can have more than 1. So you can have a village. I think you got 3 villages, 2 towns, and 1 city. So you could conceivably have 6 vassals out in play, and they're earning resources every turn. And like I said, right now it takes 6 turns for you to break even on 1 vassal. So if you have 6, you've expended a lot of resources. So hopefully you have a way of defending that. And eventually you're going to have a lot of caravans roaming around, which your opponent is going to be really interested in getting their hands on. But that's part of the strategy, right? Like I kind of want it where you could run a caravan-heavy deck where your goal is to just resource your opponent, right? Where you don't mind losing 50% of your health, reshuffling your graveyard into your deck. You don't mind that part so much, because your opponent is they're running themselves out of cards too, but you're generating so many resources that they're going to run out of cards in their deck. And if they can't bring their life total back up, they can't increase their own resources, well, you're just going to whittle them down to nothing. And then eventually, you'll have hopefully a couple of creatures that just defeat your opponent, whittle them down, and you win. But there is potentially the stalemate where your opponent is able to fend off your attacks, but can't deal you enough damage to kill you, and then you kind of reach a stalemate. So I have to try and make figure things out for that. Again, mind you, you spend half your life every time. Eventually, you get to 2 life. Eventually, you get to 1 life, and you have 1 life. You're not casting anything or very little, and your opponent is just going to come over the top at some point and whack you, right? Or you just concede the game, right? Yeah, you got 20 life. I got 1. I can't defeat you. That's game. And I think you should be able to have a checkmate system in your game. Magic doesn't have a checkmate system. I mean, you can concede at any time, but it doesn't really have a checkmate system. So yes, that's kind of the idea, the concept of this CCG. Again, it's inspired by Ashes of Creation, and I am taking the systems that Ashes of Creation has talked about and tried to come up with similar kind of situations, similar kind of things. I'm just trying to add in some systems that give a nod to Ashes of Creation. So this is not in any way endorsed by Ashes of Creation or Intrepid Studios. I do not have any permission. I have mentioned to Margaret that I have been working on this, and I would be happy to present it to them, and I have heard nothing back. But they are at the very least aware that I am doing this, and it's been several days, and I have not heard anything back from them. In fact, I think it's been almost a week. So I am taking that as neither permission nor a request to cease and desist. I think they're probably going to see what I come up with first, see if it's worthy of their attention, and if it seems like it could be potentially a threat, then, or not a threat, but if they think that this is something that could become maybe too popular, than maybe something they're designing on their own, then they may request that I not continue, or they might say, hey, we love what you've done. How would you like to come on board? And to that, I'd be, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not I work for fairly cheap. This is something I enjoy doing. I have like half a dozen CCGs I've created, and all of them are different. Some of them use similar mechanics to this with the front line, back line. Some use a Magic the Gathering kind of element system. I have one where there's the 4 primary Earth elements and a void, and that void is powerful enough to wipe out all the other 4. So, you can't combine it with other colors, but the other colors you can combine with each other, and that's based on a storyline. So I have many different iterations of things that I've been working with. So again, what do you guys think? What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Is this something that you think you might enjoy playing? My next step is to again work on a little bit of the balancing and show an actual game in play and kind of walk through the steps and kind of go from there. I will probably do that next weekend. I'm thinking because I'm pretty much ready to go now. So I guess to go through some of the cards. So again, each card will have, or not every card, but each Metropolis will have favored, I'm calling them affiliated. So this one's an economic affiliated. So what that basically means is again, because you have your economic Metropolis. So what I have here so far, economic affiliated, upkeep cost reduced by 1. Successful caravan deliveries award +2 resources. Pay 3 times the opponent economic unit upkeep to attack on your side for 1 turn. So basically what that means is, because again, these are, economic greedy, right? So I have mercenaries, right? So say you have mercenaries, and I am playing an economic Metropolis. You might be playing an economic Metropolis. Wouldn't that be exciting? So you have mercenaries, right? So they're a 3/2 creature right there in the front line. I pay 3 times its upkeep on my turn to have it attack on my side for that turn. So its upkeep is 2. I pay 6 resources. This guy turns around and smacks you. This is your card, your unit. I bribe him, and that's what it is. It's a bribe. I bribe this guy. He turns around and he attacks on my side, right? So now he crosses the line, right? And he attacks. And there is no, if you attacked me, right, he'd normally have a cooldown until your upkeep. Well, with the bribery, no, these guys, they get themselves out of bed pretty early. They just really feign laziness between rounds. So they wake up, they come on my side, I attack you. At the end of my turn, he goes back to your front line. He goes, hey, guys, we're mercenaries. This is what we do for a living, right? This is what we do, right? Even though you just gave, maybe one of your other cards a black eye, right? But, yeah. That's what this is for. Or, because it doesn't say when you have to pay this. So maybe you're attacking me. And then I basically pull it. And we see this in every movie, right? What are they paying you? I'll pay you 3 times to not hit me. Right? And they're like, yeah, okay, right? So they pay you, pay the 3 times. You go, oh, thanks a lot, bud. Yeah, no, I couldn't find him. No, I couldn't see I couldn't find the guy. I just, and then, yeah, but he doesn't hurt you, right? So maybe you only have 3 life left, 3 resources left, and this is the only creature, or the only unit your opponent has to attack you with. You pay that 6 resources, you're alive for another turn, right? So, and then pay 5 resources to search your library or tome for 1 economic unit card and place it in your hand. So say I don't have enough creatures in my hand, so I pay 5 resources, and I get to search through the library, and I can pull out any one that has the green economic line, right? So, and actually I have a better card design than this, but I mean, this is all I could really do. Like I can actually show you kind of what I have in mind for the actual cards. And I'll probably go to Fiverr and I'll find an artist to do a really nice mock-up and make sure that they send it to me with all of the options so that I can. And this is also subject to change as well, but it's going to be fairly similar to. I get fairly similar concept. This is kind of gross. I know. I'll get something better. But you'll have your summon. You'll have your summon, your upkeep, and then your damage, your defense. So basically a sword, a shield, and card abilities and/or story text. What kind of unit is it? So military. So this would be green as well. Infantry. Copyright art info, and then the bottom would be your set. Basically same concept as Magic the Gathering, except they have their set. I think up here in the corner. So I have my set icon down here. And then for augments, the reason why I kind of have the shields. Kind of like that is the idea that I have is when you add a card that gives like a +1/+0, you stack your cards up like this, right? So it's very easy to add, that +1 or +0. In fact, I think I even have one of these where it actually does. I think I actually did put a plus. Or maybe I haven't done it yet. I have some I haven't printed off. Oh yeah, there we go. It's that one. So for an example, so this card here you have called Blessing. And so Blessing removes corruption, and then it gives a -1, and then 0, right? So that's its buff. So what we do is, let's move this card over. So when you combine these 2 cards, because this is one thing Magic doesn't do, so this is why I think it's an improved card style, right? You put the Blessing underneath the card, and then now you see it says -1, and then 2, and then 0/2, so you would know that this is now a 1/2 creature. You don't need a counter. You just have to be able to do simple math, right? So if you can do simple math, it's easy. Now if it was a +1, you put a +1, right, or whatever it is. I thought about either because the creatures have their life and toughness on this side. I was thinking maybe on these cards you have it where these details here, there, are shown on the other part of the card, right? So the shield and stuff would be, it'd be more like that. It'd be more like that, right? So you'd have the actual original power toughness. Skip past this page here. It's getting hard to see with all this stuff, right? It doesn't help. But anyways, right? So you have it so maybe the blessing numbers would stick out on the other side. But I think having it like this is probably better. It's very easy to see. You stack your cards, and you can see immediately what your power and toughness, what your edits are, right? What you're doing. So I think it's trying to be somewhat intuitive with it, trying to use my brains, trying to improve the design a little bit, and so it's unique enough without making the game too difficult. And again, you can stack a lot of cards. It's kind of what I have for a basic idea. I can even put the upkeep somewhere else as well, rather than the top. But I didn't want to do the same thing as Magic and have like the health and toughness down here. So you do have to be somewhat original, right? And then so its affiliation is military. It could be creature. It could be economic, religious. It could be corrupted. It could be augment, vassal. What other card types do I have? So that'll tell you the kind of card type that it is. Like there's one, arson, remove all counters from target vassal. I spelled it right, wrong. But yeah, so you can arson. So if you have a player, an opponent who's got a nice fat city vassal, you can do that. Then you have your archers. +1 range. They're 1/1. 2 to cast, 1 to upkeep. Archers. They're cheap to feed. They're just usually scrawny guys, anyways. So yeah, there's all sorts of stuff, and I have reinforced walls. Till the end of your next turn, you cannot lose resources from physical attacks from enemy units. Right, so it's until the end of your next turn. So you play this on your current turn, and then your opponent has his turn, and then you have your next turn. And then at the start of your next turn, the reinforced walls would come down. So it's all trying to avoid that. I can cast a fog. When you're attacking a lot of these things, you're still going to be able to do that, but a lot of the stuff, the strategy is going to be trying to outwit your opponent by doing things on your own turn and kind of forcing them to figure out what they're going to do, but still having that ability eventually that you could still play a card on their turn that would ghost the battlefield or something like that, right? So there will be cards that you can use on your opponent's turn, but they're going to be rare or ultra or rare uncommon or something like that, right? So and part of that's the strategy of making it a collectible card game, that you don't want it too easy to collect the whole set. And I'm not sure exactly how they do all the numbers on that stuff, but so again, I think gives you the concept of it all. I'm just working on some balancing stuff. The idea is to eventually, maybe if I don't get interest from them, I may consider again a Kickstarter or something like that, GoFundMe, and see if I can't fund it myself. I am definitely going to look into it. As far as what would the cost be to develop this into a finished product. I know it's not going to be cheap, but yeah, that's just kind of some of the ideas I have. So again, the Caravan, I like some of the systems I have. They seem like they will work. They seem fairly balanced as far as the systems go. It's just really balancing out the units and the unit abilities and stuff like that. The idea of the game is you should ideally not be able to kill your opponent in 5 rounds, right? The thought is, if you were to get everything perfect, you should still be looking at a 10-round game, right? 5 rounds for you, 5 rounds for your opponent, or 10 rounds each. But you should, between 5 to 10, I'm hoping should be the fastest. And of course, that also assumes that your opponent is doing a lot of the damage to themselves. Because remember, every time you want to cast cards, you're taking it from your own resources, right? So let's just do a random shuffle and see what I get for a random hand here. Just kind of give you an example, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my first hand. So I get, oh yeah, this definitely be a fast game. So I got 2 mercenaries, got a catapult, and I got a corrupted crow, and I got a sabotage. So sabotage is destroy target siege machine, which means if my opponent puts out a siege machine, I can destroy it, one card. So on my first turn, I play 2 mercenaries. So that's 8, because they're 4 each. Got my cards in here backwards. So that's 8. I have a Corrupted Crow, because it's early enough in the game. So even though the Corrupted Crow has advanced, flying, and corrupted, units blocking Corrupted Crow become corrupted, and they gain +1/+0, because corruption makes you more deadly. But it's advanced, which means when this comes into play, it comes into play at the front line immediately. So I can attack the same turn it comes into play. So I do 2 damage to you right away. So on my first turn, I've spent 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then 6 for the catapult. So it's 11, 17. So I've gone from 100 down to what 17, 83 life, right? So I'm at 83 life, and I've dealt you 3 damage on the first turn. So before you have done anything, you're already down to 97, right? So let's take my other deck. Where's the Oh, I think I accidentally shuffled the Metropolis in here. So let's grab the other deck. Just like this is, again, just a quick example. So, I mean, already you're down a fifth of your life on your very first turn. And I have 1 card in my hand because I have the Sabotage. Right, so say it's your turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because you get to draw an extra card because it's the start of your turn. So on your turn, So on your turn, you get a smoke screen, which is no units deal damage this turn. You're not going to use that right now. Yeah, you have an infantry, which is a 4 casting cost, 3/2. You have a trebuchet. So catapult has +2 range, right? So the catapult from the back line can attack the front line and the back line of the opponent. Trebuchet has range 3, so it can attack the Metropolis directly. I have a local militia, which is a 1/1, but it costs 2. I have a city-state vassal, and I have an upgrade weapon. Right, so smoke screen we're going to hang on to. So now we cast the infantry, the local militia, the trebuchet, which is 8. So that's 14 already. Let's do the +1 upgrade weapon. So that's 16, and we'll do that to the infantry, because then the infantry is a 4/2. And then I have a city-state vassal, which costs me 15. But each upkeep, it adds 3 resources to count 3 resource counters, and then at any time I can pay 3 resource counters to launch a caravan. So if we do that, we go 15, 10, 25, 27, 31. So that's 31 damage, or 31 resources spent, plus the 3 damage is 34. So we're down to what, 70, 66 life. 66 resources left, right? Now, you go back to the other guy's turn, so because we have a Corrupted Crow, which we're going to keep, so that's 6. Catapult has an upkeep of 3. The Mercenaries have an upkeep of 2, but because they're economic, my economic Metropolis reduces their upkeep by 1. So each Mercenary's upkeep is 1, so that's 3, 9, 10, 11. And I was at how much life? 83. So now I'm down to 70-something, right? And I'm going to spend the 5 to sabotage my opponent's trebuchet. So I'm already into 60 life. So I've burned up almost half of my life on the second turn. And then I'm going to attack, right? Can't block the crow because it's flying. So it's going to do another 2 damage. Or sorry, 2 damage, not 3 damage. Right? And then I can block. Let's see, I have the mercenaries move up to the front line. So they don't get to attack. My catapult stays in the back line. And because my infantry and local militia are in the back line, because that's where they're summoned, my catapult does 3 damage. So I blow up the infantry. So, boom, gone. So now all I have is a local militia, which is a 1/1. Right, so you can see how very quickly the game moves. So you have basically both players are almost down 50% by their third turn. And that's where it kind of starts to slow down, though, right? Because then you're dealing mostly with just upkeep costs, and because the one guy has the city-state vassal, they start earning counters. So if they can live 3 turns, pop this thing, and then they'll get some of those resources back. And then meanwhile, while the caravan is moving, right? Because remember, the caravan's moving here. Oh. Get this going, right? So you spend your 3, right? So the caravan has it's moving. So next turn it moves. So the city gets 3, moves again. 6, moves again. 9. So by the time the caravan gets to the metro, this thing's already got like 12 counters on it, right? Or 9 counters, right? Because you summon it on the one turn, it uses all the counters. And then when it moves, the first time, this thing gets another 3 counters on it, because it's a city. So you have 9 counters by the time your caravan gets back to gets to the Metropolis. And so if you had 9 on there already, then you spent 3 resources to create the caravan, and so you're going to get 6, right? And then you spend, say, on the next turn, you get 12, spend 3, and then 9 go, right? And you just keep that going. And now, say you have a couple more of these, right, towns or village states, and they all run independent caravans. You can't combine them all into one caravan. So that'll definitely be one of those questions I think people are going to ask is, can you combine all of them into one? And no, you have to run independent caravans for each node, because the idea is these vassals are around your metropolis. They're not all side by side with your Metropolis. And yeah, so hopefully, I'm sure that would have been a potential question at some point for people. So yeah, let's just make sure we put all the right cards in the right deck. So yeah, eventually, like I said, I'm going to sit down and actually play a couple of games on camera and let you guys point out all the flaws, all the bugs, and help out with the balancing issues. Like I said, I don't have room on my desk right now because it's a bit of a mess, but we'll probably do that next week. So I've spent 2 hours on this, not quite 2 hours. I will trim this down. Any questions? Any final thoughts? What do you think about this? I know Danny D, you're saying that you'd pay money for this, and I think that's appreciated. It's definitely something that I would want to do, and I'd want to make it affordable. Like I said, I have to look at what the printing costs would be to have something like this actually made and produced. Hopefully, the rules seem fairly simple. I know I've tried to over-explain things. Hopefully, that hasn't made it worse. But I think this is potentially going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm going to probably play it with my girlfriend and work on that. The great thing is you can easily make an app. I mean, you could actually make this a tavern game. It is simple enough that you could probably program this game into Ashes as well, and that would be a lot of fun because you could what I would do actually is have it where if you buy a starter deck, you'd get a code in that starter deck, and your starter deck would be pre-made, so you'd have pre-made decks, and then you could maybe buy with in-game gold. A starter deck, and then you could punch in your code from the starter deck that you've already bought, and then you'd have that exact same starter deck in game to then build upon, right? And then you could buy, you could win individual cards, right? You have to ante up a card or something like that. I don't know if they'd actually allow something like that in the game, but I think that's how Gwent works, and I think that would be kind of fun. So, or you could build a deck offline based on the cards you have, because it really, I think, would be fairly easy to have like a code on packs or something like that to know what cards were inside for the game, or that code would give you a random card in game. Then you're dealing with RNG. But the thing is, it's a tavern game. It's not going to affect the game at all, right? Because it's just a tavern game. It does basically show who has more money, because obviously they've been able to spend more money to buy more packs to get more, but it would have absolutely no bearing on the game itself. So you could do something like that. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there, and big thank you to my subscribers and my supporters: Guardian Maver, Core Code, Gramp Game, Yodamu, Woodchip, Upfront Poop Dog, Random Runes, Magnet, Ornithosophilus, Fenrir, Danny Montany, Pug Planet, Calveski, Dylan AJW, Just Hit Shift, Ice Mikey, Lion Man, and Just Braden. Thank you guys so much for your support, being subscribers and friends of the channel. Hope to see you all again very soon.